On the 22nd of January 1901, inside of Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, Queen Victoria took her last breaths. She was a queen who had reigned over Britain for a very long time, and her death was a huge problem for the nation that she reigned over, and the lands that she oversaw. It was a long time since a king or queen had died, and there was no one around who had any recollection of royal funerals and state funerals, and because of this there was a huge amount of panic regarding Victoria's funeral and death. However, inside of her bedroom, inside of her favourite residence, the queen who had ruled for a massive 63 years died surrounded by her family. She had in her final years not been very well, and she had suffered with depression following the death of her beloved husband, Prince Albert. However, what was the story of the dreadful death of Queen Victoria? Queen Victoria believed that the year 1900 was her worst year, as the Boer War, which was being fought between the British and Africa, was causing her turmoil, and she was very anxious about this. Her eldest son, the Prince of Wales, was also shot at by a young boy who was protesting the conflict when he was in Belgium, but her eldest daughter Becky, the Dowager Empress of Germany, was also suffering very badly with breast cancer, which had been spreading to different areas of her body, and she was now inside of a German castle in a lot of pain. There was further upset as she was told in the August of 1900 that her favourite son, Alfred, the Duke of Edinburgh, had died from throat cancer, caused by his heavy drinking and the fact he was a chain smoker. Victoria wrote of this, "Oh God, my poor Alfie. Gone too soon. My third grown-up child. It is hard at 81. However, there was even more bad news on the horizon for Queen Victoria, as her beloved grandson, Prince Christian Victor, the son of her daughter, Princess Helena, died when he was away with the British Army in South Africa, as he contracted a fever. But then, towards the end of the year, Victoria's best friend, Jane, Lady Churchill, was found dead in her bed when she was visiting Queen Victoria at Osborne House. All of this news affected the Queen very negatively, and she was not very well herself. She was 81, which was remarkable by the standard of the Victorian period, and she was once a feisty woman, but this spark was going. Victoria was not eating as well as she had previously, and she lost a lot of weight in a short amount of time. She was also stuck in a wheelchair and could not see well, and she often was very confused. For over 60 years she had reigned, and no one in Britain had known anything about a time with her not on the throne. She had reigned for such a long time, and they didn't know any different, but the children of Queen Victoria could not accept that she was ill, and there were no preparations at all made regarding her death. Victoria, in one of her final diary entries, wrote, "Another year has begun, and feeling so weak and unwell that I enter upon it sadly." The Queen was inside of Osborne House, her residence on the Isle of Wight, and she spent her final days there, and the Queen, whilst inside of her bedchamber, was getting more ill, and the royal doctors knew what was on the horizon. Her family, however, did not want to believe what was occurring, and her doctor, Sir James Reed, who had been Victoria's doctor for years, knew what was coming. The royal family did not believe this, that she could ever die, and Princess Helena and Beatrice tried to keep everything as normal as they could, and they expected her to recover. The doctors treating Victoria argued amongst themselves, and a number of members of the royal family were reluctant to go to Osborne when they were ordered. But the Prince of Wales was even disappointed that he had to cancel his weekend plans, and he was of course the heir to the throne. Also, the Duke of Cognaut was en route to Berlin to celebrate 200 years of the Prussian monarchy, and he had to turn back, but others were even at the theatre. Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany was summoned from Germany, and he cancelled any celebrations, and he travelled to the Isle of Wight. He also forced the royal family to make the news of the Queen's deteriorating condition public, to prepare the nation. The announcement shocked the people of Britain, and the world. Once new headlines said that Queen unconscious, sinking fast. The press had never really handled a story of such weight, and they even speculated and claimed Victoria was getting better. But the Queen could not herself accept that death was on the horizon. She asked Sir James Reed if she was getting better and said, "I would like to live a little longer, as I have a few things to settle. Her doctor replied, "Yes, your Majesty has been very ill, but you are better now." This could have been the feeling some people have before death and before they go downhill, as they claim they are feeling better. But from the 17th of January 1901, Queen Victoria had a number of very serious strokes, and the entire royal family was rapidly ordered to get to Osborne House and to the Queen's bedside. The government business came to a stop as the Queen could not do her work and duties, and there were talks of her son being made regent in the meantime. But there was not enough time to sort this. Calls were being made to the house every minute from the newspapers for updates, and people began to gather outside of the gates of Osborne House. Victoria was surrounded by her family in her small bedroom, and the Bishop of Winchester and the rector of the local church prayed for her, and hymns were sung. Kaiser Wilhelm II, Victoria's grandson, and the German Emperor was also by her side, and the Queen could not see, and she said, "Sir James, I am very ill." Constant reassurance came from her doctor, and he said she would get better. But this was not a good sight for members of the royal family, and seeing the once strong Queen Victoria in this way was very distressing for them, and there was a huge amount of crying. Each son, daughter and grandchild, one by one, was summoned into the bedroom to kiss the Queen's hand and to say goodbye. At 6:30 in the evening, on the 22nd of January 1901, Queen Victoria died in her bedroom in Osborne House at the age of 81. The news of her death came out before the new King Edward VII had been formally accepted of the crown. An announcement was placed on the gates of the house, and the news then travelled around the world, and newspapers began to print memorial editions, and the windows of shops were covered in black mourning cloth. But there was a lot of panic, and no one knew how to plan a state funeral or the procedure for this. There was a lot of panic in government, and Victoria had requested a full military state funeral. She did not want to be embalmed, and she did not want to lie in state, and she wished for white ponies to pull the gun carriage that her coffin was placed on. She also asked to be buried away from Westminster and St George's Chapel, and instead inside of the mausoleum in Frogmore with her husband Albert. Kaiser Wilhelm II had ordered a death mask to be cast of Victoria's face, which was against her wishes, and this offended the British royal family. However, the Duke of York was also very ill, and the royal undertaker had arrived from London, but there was a problem as they forgot the coffin. There was a local man, however, who was asked to make the coffin for the longest reigning monarch that Britain had ever seen at the time, and it was also said that there was chaos. But the coffins is then sent to Osborne House. The Dr. James Reed, along with Victoria's dresser, Mrs. Tuck, helped to prepare the Queen's body. Victoria did not want to be embalmed, and the floor of the coffin was scattered with charcoal to stop smell of decay, and her hair was cut, and she was dressed in a white silk dressing gown, and on this was her garter ribbon and star. Victoria's wedding veil was also placed over her face, and following this the Kaiser and the new king lifted her body into the coffin, and a final goodbye was said to Victoria as the lid of the coffin was placed on top. There has also been a number of secret items, such as the wedding ring of her Scottish servant and favourite John Brown, which was placed on Victoria's finger, along with a lock of Brown's hair. The funeral procession of Queen Victoria was large, and her cortege crossed the Solent, and a huge number of soldiers were sent to London for the procession. It was the biggest state occasion since the Duke of Wellington's funeral, and it lasted 2 hours. But during this, the coffin almost fell off the carriage, and there was a lot of drama. Some archbishops arrived to the funeral service too early, and the nave was half empty inside of the chapel, and more people needed to have been invited. But Victoria was then interred inside of the mausoleum in Frogmore by the side of her beloved husband, Prince Albert, who died many decades before. But Queen Victoria was a queen who oversaw a huge amount of change across the nation and her empire. She was seen as a large part of the Industrial Revolution and the cultural shifts that came with it, and she also was the head of the British Empire when it was in the height of its power and influence. Victoria was also regarded as the Empress of India, and after reigning for 63 years in Britain, She died inside of her favourite house. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.